Welcome to Staffordshire University and this short presentation on the law, practice and procedures relating to the identification of criminal suspects. My name is Ian Ackerley and I'm a lecturer in policing and criminal investigation, and formerly I was an Assistant Chief Constable in Staffordshire Police and also Nottinghamshire Police. The identification by witnesses of suspects is an important and integral part of all criminal investigations. Often it can supplement the forensic evidence that we have, and on occasions where there is an absence of forensic evidence, then this information and this evidence has to stand by itself. It's important that the rules are followed because it is very easy for an identification to be done both honestly and with the best of intentions, but for it still to be mistaken. The rules are contained within Code D of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, and they apply when an offender has been seen to commit an offence and a witness is given the opportunity of making an identification. The rules are there to safeguard against mistaken identity. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty poor at recognising people, and on many occasions think I've seen somebody that I know, only to be embarrassed when I find out that it's somebody completely different. And so these things happen in a social setting, and whilst that's a little bit embarrassing on occasions, in a criminal setting it's absolutely vital that the identification is made correctly and accurately because of people's liberty being at stake. So the point is, the rules are here to safeguard against mistaken identity. Generally, they focus on the visual identification, but it doesn't preclude it from being an oral investigation. And I remember a case in Stoke-on-Trent, one of grievous bodily harm, where the witness heard an individual shouting from 3 or 4 gardens away, had known this person for quite some considerable time, recognised his voice because he was very loud in the neighbourhood, and did the identification on the oral aspects of what had been said. In essence, the whole process, or the processes, are there to test the witness's ability to identify the suspect. Before we get into the formal rules, the whole process starts with the witness giving a first description. This is really important, and I'll explain why in a few slides' time. But this first description can be recorded in the incident log, which is where the control room operator takes a note as the witness is talking to them on the telephone. It could be in the officer's pocket notebook when they attend, or it could be a self-made note by the witness on a piece of paper or a rough pad, or indeed it could be in the witness statement that the officer records from the witness. But it's important that a first description is taken in close proximity to the offence happening. In broad terms, there are 2 categories of identification, and this is when the suspect's identity is not known, and secondly when the suspect's identity is known, and I'm going to explain more about that now. So when we don't know who the suspect is, the first stages of going around the identification is that the officer takes a first description from the witness, and the witness is then given the opportunity of engaging in a street identification, or to be the recipient of some photographs being shown to them. With regard to a street identification, this generally takes the form of the witness being put into a police car and driven around the locality to see if they can identify the person that they've previously seen committing the crime. Important factors here are that the officer must not draw to the witness's attention any individual. The officer mustn't be asking questions such as, do you think it's him or do you think it's her? The witness has to make their own mind up and point anybody out who they believe they saw previously committing the crime. Only one witness at a time really should be doing this. If there are more than one witnesses, they would need separate officers, and as soon as an identification has been made by one witness, then all of the others must be withdrawn, because we need to keep our witnesses for the more formal processes of when the identity of the suspect is known. If a street identification isn't possible, then the other opportunity open to the police is the showing of photographs. This ought to be done by a sergeant, but can be done by a constable under the supervision and direction of the sergeant. There must be a minimum of 12 photographs shown to the witness. The witness must be told that the person they saw may or may not be included in the set of photographs, and a record must be kept of the layout of the photographs in order that they can be reconstituted if required by the court or by the defence. So if it is that we get a positive identification out of the street identification or the showing of photographs, we would move to the next stage. I should say that with regard to the showing of photographs, you would only show one witness at a time, because the importance here is we're always trying to keep our witnesses for the more formal processes of when the identity of the suspect is known. So when must an identification procedure be held? Well, where a witness has identified a suspect, has expressed their ability to be able to identify the person, there's a reasonable chance of them doing so, and the suspect crucially disputes being the person the witness claims to have seen. So when we arrive at the position where we believe we know the identity of the suspect, 4 processes are open to us. And they're open to us when the identity of the suspect is known and that person is available or will be in a short time available to stand on one of these particular processes. The first and best process from a police point of view is a video identification. This is where moving images are recorded of the suspect and they are played with a sequence of other similar images of people doing the same thing. Generally, this is more successful because we have a bank of images and we can match the suspect to a whole range of different individuals. And if there is something that is unique or unusual about the identity of the suspect, this can be removed from the video image, or it can be added to the similar images that the suspect is being compared with. Where there is one suspect, then the witness must be shown the image of the suspect together with at least 8 other images of a similar nature, making 9 moving images in total. Where there are 2 suspects of a similar appearance, then they can be shown together with at least 12 other images, making 14 images in total. So the video identification is a very effective, very cost-effective way. It means that the lineup, if you like, is much more appropriate and similar to the suspect's background and standing in life. It is better for the witness because they're not face to face with the suspect. Suspect isn't allowed to attend the showing of the video identification, but the suspect's solicitor is. The second one that we could look at is an identification parade. And this is the old-fashioned lineup where people used to stand in a line, again one suspect with 8 other people of similar background and standing, or if there are 2 suspects, standing with at least 12 other people. So again it's 9 and 14 people that would be in the lineups. There are certain problems with this because it's difficult often to get people at short notice who look similar enough to the suspects to come forward and line up. It's difficult to manage, and additionally it can be quite intimidating for the witness to walk up and down the line in close proximity to the person that they believe may have committed the crime. This is mitigated on occasions by having one-way screens, which was a good innovation, but an identification parade is less effective for a good identification than the video identification is. The third way we could go is a group identification. This is where the suspect is taken out into the community. Maybe this is in a shopping centre and the witness is at the top of an elevator or an escalator, and the suspect is allowed to get onto the escalator at any particular point and emerge onto the top floor, and the suspect can choose when to do that, who to get on alongside, and the witness will point the person out if they see them. It could also be at a train station, just as a train is disembarking, or at a bus station. Again, this is challenging from a control point of view, because all of the control then is in the hands of the suspect rather than the police. And the fourth and last way is if we haven't had success with any of the others, or any of the others are not appropriate, that we do a simple confrontation, which mainly entails having the suspect in a room, bringing the witness in and saying, is this the person that assaulted you? Is this the person that you saw breaking into the house? And this is the least effective, both evidentially and also from the witness's perspective, because it really is a confrontation. The person responsible for organising the conduct of all identification processes is an officer of a rank of at least inspector, and that person has to be unconnected with the investigation. And that goes for everybody who's involved. So if we've got an identification parade with 5 or 6 officers helping, none of those officers can have had any involvement in the case, even down to the point where one of the officers may have taken a statement from a peripheral witness that has no material bearing on the case, but they would still be construed as being connected with the case. So this needs very careful management. The seminal case that underpins the whole identification process is R.V. Turnbull from 1977. And although an old case now, it is still relevant to today's evidential procedures and also to the court process. So this case applies where the prosecution case rests wholly or substantially on the correctness of one or more identifications by witnesses. The judge needs to warn the jury of the special need for caution before they convict the accused on the reliance of that evidence, in case it's mistaken, in case it's somebody like me who is poor at identifying and recognising somebody and I've been convincing. If the judge doesn't warn the jury in these terms, then the conviction may be quashed, and this happened in the case of R.V. Andrews in 1993. The judge should tell the jury that caution is required to avoid the risk of an injustice. A witness who's honest may be wrong, even if they're convinced that they're right. A witness who's convincing may still be wrong. More than one witness may be wrong. And a witness who recognises the defendant, even when the witness knows the defendant very well, may also be wrong. And this case laid out 8 particular rules that the police need to incorporate in the witness statements. And again, this is to guard against any miscarriage. So we call it the advocate. We like a mnemonic in the police. So the first A is the amount of time under observation. So how long did the witness see the suspect for? How far away were they? What was the distance? What was the visibility like? What was the weather like? What was the lighting like? So what was the visibility? Were there any obstructions in the way that could have possibly impeded? Was the suspect known, or had the suspect previously been seen? And if so, where did that happen and when did it happen? Was there any reason, any distinctive feature about the suspect as to why the witness would remember them? What was the time lapse between the suspect being seen and the subsequent identification process? Because obviously people's image and people's appearance can change over a particular time. So this is a really important part. And the reason for the first description is here. Any error or material discrepancy. So is there a material discrepancy between the appearance of the suspect now and what the first description recorded at the time of the crime? So all witness statements with regard to identification need to include the 8 points of the Turnbull summarised as advocate. Going to finish with a short scenario about a burglary that took place at number 30 Barrington Close. £20,000 worth of jewellery has been stolen. Burglary occurred at 11:30 in the evening and the weather was fine and dry. All the street lighting and security lighting at the location was working correctly. There are 8 potential witnesses to the burglary, all up at their windows, all at 11:30. And our task is to identify in what order we will utilise the witnesses and for which identification processes. So before I show you a graphic, I'm going to give you a bit of a history of the potential witnesses at our disposal. Mr. and Mrs. Smith are age 75 and they live at number 26, Barrington Close. Mrs. Smith is waiting for a cataract operation and she has limited sight in her left eye. Mr. and Mrs. Jones at number 28 are 45 years of age and they have A1 eyesight. Mr. and Mrs. Walton at 32 are age 55. They both wear glasses, but when they're wearing their glasses or their contact lenses, then their corrected vision is excellent. And Mr. and Mrs. Potts at number 34 are age 28 and they have perfect eyesight. When I show you the graphic, the red dots represent the male witnesses, the white dots represent the female witnesses, the yellow dots represent the activity of the offender and the path the offender took from the crime, and the stars that are there represent the street lighting and security lighting. But before I show you the graphic, I want to just give you a visual image of the kind of cul-de-sac that I'm talking about. So this is not exactly the same, but it's the kind of area that I envisage for this fictional case. Nice houses, quite a lot of undergrowth and some street lighting. Now if I explain this scenario for you, you can see number 30 is the house that was attacked. It has 2 security lighting. It has it here on this corner and also on this corner here. And the people at number 26, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you can see that Mrs. Smith is in the sitting in front of the small window, and the rather large triangle with the white border is showing her range of vision. Now we must bear in mind that Mrs. Smith is waiting for a cataract operation and she has limited sight in her left eye. Her husband, sitting in front of the larger window, has a limited view between the 2 green circles which represent bushes, and can only see the suspect for a short time just underneath the security lighting on the corner of number 30. Number 28, the lady, female witness here, has an absolutely bird's eye view of the suspect coming out of the window of number 30, because the suspect has gone in through the back, here and come out here. So the witness at number 28, the lady at number 28, I suggest is the witness that we want to preserve for the formal identification process because she has the best view. The next person with a really good view is the man at number 32. And again, the man at number 32 sees the suspect at the back of number 30 before and immediately before the break-in takes place. So these 3 witnesses are seeing the suspect, but they're also seeing them in a criminal setting. So my suggestion is that we try as far as possible to preserve these witnesses for the formal identification process. When we look at the family at number 34, they have a very good view because both are in the same window. There's a street light here, and the suspect goes straight underneath the street light before heading out of the cul-de-sac. So the people at number 34 are the prime witnesses to take on an immediate street identification. Separately, of course, into the location to see if we can identify who it is. What they can say effectively, though, is that they saw a strange person in their cul-de-sac. They can't say that they saw any criminal activity. So from the investigation process, these are the key people who should be taken on a street identification. Similarly, Mr. Smith at number 26 could also be taken on a street identification. and Mrs. Smith could be taken, but her identification will be weakened by the fact that she has such poor visibility in her left eye. If we are lucky enough to get a suspect identified through the street identification, then we will move to the people from number 28, the lady from 28, and the gentleman from number 32. If we're not, we'd have to revert to a photographic ID, and again we would go in the same process. The people from number 34, followed by the gentleman from 26, then Mrs. Smith at number 26, and then if all of that failed, we'd be bringing the people from number 32 and from number 28 into play. When we get to the formal identification process, in these circumstances, undoubtedly we'd be trying to do a video identification, followed by an identification parade, followed by a group identification if the other two were not successful. That concludes a very short input with regard to the identification of suspects. I hope that you found it interesting, and thank you for listening.